I ain't gonna punch a clock no more, gonna work with my family. Can't shake the notion I've been cheating myself for another man's fantasy. Pick up my plant back garden out back, sunshine will do me some good. Think I'll take a shot at making rock and roll be what it could.
My name is John Bush, and this is my fiancée, Catherine. We're two grassroots activists doing what we can to create a more peaceful world. For years, we've fought the man through the political system. Now we have a family, and it's time for a change. Rather than fighting, we want to build new forms of community outside of the government's influence and show the world that we can rely on ourselves and our community to solve our common problems. We can't say for sure if this will work.
I'm trying to get the hang of this thing.
But we are bound and determined to find out. We've moved out of the city onto a farm in the outskirts of Austin, Texas for our experiment in lifestyle design. Now, we're new to this way of life, so we'll be traveling around the country and learning from experts along the way. Growing our own food, harvesting our own energy, and living an all-around self-sufficient lifestyle. We aim to get off the grid and be the masters of our own lives. Now that's sovereign living.
Hello, this is Peaceful Anarchism on the Voluntary Virtues Network. Every Thursday at 1 p.m. And you can also find me on theconsciousresistance.com and theseedsofliberty.com. So I'm still at Liberty Fest, and I have another great guy here, John Bush, who's the host of SovereignBTC and the owner of Brave New Books online bookstore, also brick and mortar. So John, thanks a lot for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I first saw you on the. I think I saw you on Anarchast, right? And then and then I checked out your Sovereign Living series, and I actually through the first episode of the Sovereign Living, I saw the book Rules to Break. And I'm like, they got to get that book. That's an awesome book. So just tell me a little about what you've been up to lately.
Well, my wife and I recently purchased Brave New Books. It's a brick-and-mortar bookstore in Austin, Texas that's been around since 2006, specializing in suppressed books, libertarian literature, economics. And we also sell a ton of natural health products as well. So we've been really busy with that since May, and it's more than just a retail store. We also launched an online store at bravenewbookstore.com. It's really like a community space, a community center, a hub for the local liberty movement and people that are passing through to come and share ideas and organize and educate ourselves. So we've been really busy with that, and we're both huge Bitcoin fans. My wife moderated the Bitcoin panel here at this event, and I've also been focusing a lot of energy on the podcast I do on the Let's Talk Bitcoin network, SovereignBTC, encouraging Bitcoin fans to explore the philosophy of anarchism and sharing with people practical ideas on how you can adopt Bitcoin into your daily life.
Cool. So I assume you're unschooling advocates, supporters with your kids?
Yeah, we're unschooling our children. They're 4 and 2.5, and essentially unschooling is life-led learning, where you, rather than having a dictated curriculum or sending your kids off to be raised by the state, you find out what their interests are, and then the role of the parents is to facilitate those interests. So, for example, my daughter loves to dance. So we have her enrolled in a dance class. She watches dance YouTube videos. She puts on little mini recitals for us and our family to watch. And we've just tried to help her with that as much as possible. She also loves arts and crafts, so we have a huge arts and craft collection that usually ends up all over the bus. We live in a converted school bus.
Nice.
My son is real into trains, so he has a bunch of little train sets, and we ride the train whenever possible. We go to the train museum. So we're just trying to have as much of an enriching lifestyle for them. And we take them with us everywhere we go, whether it's a conference or vacation or anywhere. So they're both immersed in the culture that we're in, and I think it's really helped them to have a well-rounded education in general.
Yeah. I wrote an article called "Living and Learning Are Inseparable," And I definitely believe it's true. People think that you don't go to a brick and mortar place and sit in a school desk and be quiet and listen to the teacher. You're not going to get an education. That's the only place you can get an education. And I talk about homeschooling and unschooling, but when people ask me, I say homeschooling only because most people have not heard of unschooling, and homeschooling is radical enough. And with my grandfather actually recently asked me, your daughter, you said, is into dance. My daughter's 3. She just started ballet class, and I told my grandfather, who's like 80, I said, she's been taking a ballet class, and he's like, isn't that contradictory to homeschooling? So I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm like, and it's basically like the false dichotomy, right? If the state's not going to provide education, then we're against educating our kids, or that we're against learning, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's confusing for people because everyone's just used to sending your children off to school, which it's kind of strange that that's the norm. The normal thing is to send your kids to be raised by complete strangers. Oftentimes it's young people that are just out of college who don't really know much about the world. Sometimes they know about as much about the world as your kids do. And there's all sorts of terrible things that happen at school, from bullying to sexual assault, to being institutionalized and propagandized to believe that government is the be-all, end-all, and we should worship the presidency. If you notice, there's pictures on the wall at public schools of presidents and politicians, not like scientists and philosophers. Right. But yeah, it's confusing for people, but that's okay, because more and more people are seeing that the public school system's an utter failure, and what my wife and I are trying to do, being extremely open about our choices, is to educate people that there are alternatives. And we're actually pretty proud of the results. Both of our kids are well-rounded. They speak well. My daughter's starting to read words, and I just think that it's extremely important that we allow our children to flourish based on what it is that they're interested in, rather than trying to shove something down their throats. They're going to enjoy learning more, too, if it's something they're interested in, rather than a curriculum or a standard that the federal government impresses upon them. It's kind of a trip.
Yeah, one thing that kind of amused me is nobody claims to predict the future. Nobody knows what's going to happen next year, next month, next year, right? But for some reason, we believe that politicians have the ability to know what the kids are going to need in 20 years when they're adults. Like, what's the world going to look like in 20 years? And I tell people, think back 20 years ago, internet was just getting started, or there was no internet, even right before the internet. How many parents at that time could have predicted the internet? YouTube and Wikipedia and Google, right? And what's going to happen from now until 20 years later? We have no idea. We have no idea when information is going to be relevant to their lives, right? And so for me, unschooling and voluntarism it's a philosophy of humility, that we don't know what's good for other people. We only know ourselves, right? And I wouldn't even say we know what's good for our own kids, because they're individual human beings themselves, right?
Sure. Yeah, it's important to let people be themselves and to not try to impress yourself upon them. And there's a lot of people, even that homeschool, that are still authoritarian, just as authoritarian or more authoritarian than public school. So I think it's important to give our children as much freedom as possible so they can truly become their own unique, independent individuals.
I think most parents are afraid of freedom for their kids. There's if my kid doesn't have things to do, doesn't have classes to go to, he's just going to sit all day and play video games or play some kind of other game or whatever, and they're not going to be learning. And it reminds me of this one meme where you see a kid, doing paint, a little kid, and it's like there's no such thing as just playing. This is how I learn, right? And every single thing that people do of value starts with play. It starts with actual interest in what you're doing, right? Nobody forced you to do it. If you love it, you're going to learn, you're going to want to be adept, and you're going to want to be a master at it, and perhaps, most likely, you'll make a business out of it.
Yeah, I think most people, parents included, are insecure within reason, and there's a lot of really bad habits and cycles that are just continued from parent to children, and then when the children become parents, they impart it upon their kids. So I think that insecurity arises from insecurity with being worried about children, and freedom arises from not really knowing what to do with freedom themselves, because so much is controlled, whether it's from parents or family or social norms or government intervention or edicts, that people don't have the capacity to really recognize that personal responsibility plays a big role in how we figure out how we're going to spend our time. And that's why it's important to just allow these kids to flourish, to be laissez-faire as much as possible, and let them learn by the consequences of their actions rather than what we think is right or wrong for them.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that when I tell people about giving your child freedom to do what they want, to learn what they want, to engage in any activity they want, one of the first things they say is, so what if your kid runs in the street? What if your kid touches a hot stove? So apparently volunteers are for kids getting hit by cars, right? or for the kids getting burned. I mean, it's really amazing. It's like, or when we say no corporal punishment, no spanking for kids for punishment, no punishment at all. What? So you're just gonna let your kid, get run over or get hit by a car, and you're not going to punish him for it. But when in fact, when kids get hurt, again, that's a learning experience. Like you ride your bike, you fall, that's a learning experience, right? Pain is learning enough. You don't need to add additional artificial pain to the equation, right?
Yeah, for sure. There's intrinsic consequences to actions that are the best. Experience is the greatest teacher. That's not to say you let your child run out in the street. If your kid is too young to understand that if you run into the street you could get hit by a car, then keep them in the stroller or hold their hand. Or at the end of the day, if they're so unruly that they're a threat to their own safety, then don't put them in a position where they could hurt themselves. Our daughter burned her fingers a couple years ago on a hot plate that was right in front of her at a festival, and she learned not to touch the stove. I think a lot of things they just come natural, and people think that their kids are idiots, but we don't give credit to children. They're pretty bright when you allow them to learn and allow them to have the confidence and trust them. And going back on what I said before, a lot of people don't trust themselves, so they're not willing to trust their children either.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I hang out with a bunch of homeschooling mothers, and one mother especially, she's more unschooling, and her kids are like 6 and 5, and when we go out to parks or we go in the forest, we go hiking, different things, she has knives that she brings for them, and they're not like small Swiss Army knives. They're like the bigger knives, but they're pretty skilled at it because they already have experience with it. They've used them. They have cut themselves occasionally, but again, it's a learning experience. Hopefully it's not a deep cut, but they do have these learning experience, and I can imagine how other parents would look at that and say, you let your child have a knife, and we're afraid to give our children freedom because of like you said, our own insecurities. We weren't trusted as children, so therefore we can't trust. It's a cycle of violence and a cycle of distrust.
Yeah, I agree completely. If we need to trust ourselves and trust our instincts and allow our children to experience the world, or if they're sheltered, or if their experience is based on what we think is best for them or what was best for us, then as soon as they have the opportunity and they actually do have the freedom away from you, they're probably going to get into a lot of trouble and maybe make some bad decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Let me ask you one question. Have people come up to you and ask you well, what about college and university? What are you going to do then? Like, what if they don't have a diploma? What do you say to those kind of people?
Well, I have a diploma, and I gained some. I learned how to research was one thing that I learned really well in college, but it's completely inflated industry, and the diplomas don't really mean much these days. But no, my children, if they'll have the total freedom. So if they decide in a couple of years that they want to go to public school, we'll let them give it a try. I hope they don't make that decision. Right. But if they want to go to college, more power to them. But I have a feeling a lot of these unschooled children are going to have confidence and knowledge unlike other children, and most of them will probably embark on entrepreneurial ventures. We hope to be able to pass our bookstore on to our kids someday. If they're into it, if they're not, then whatever. They can do whatever they please. Sure. But I think there'll be more ingenuity, more creativity, and you'll find that unschooled and homeschooled kids are more likely to chart their own course. And of course, with public schools, part of the program, part of the reason why these schools were created in the first place was to mold a citizen that's not only obedient to the government, but that's also useful to industry. So there's a reason why there's a bell that rings and cues you up. There's a reason why parents are authoritarian. You have to ask permission to go to the bathroom, and you sit in a desk and the hours are school starts like 8 to 3:30 or something. They're getting children used to working a 9 to 5 and working for the man. So I think we'll find that children that don't have those barriers and that aren't forced into a box will probably be some of the biggest innovators that the world sees in the future.
Yeah. I'm constantly amazed. I talked to a couple of homeschoolers like Dana Martin and a few others, and so often I see the trend that homeschoolers and unschoolers tend to be entrepreneurs at very, very young ages. You know, they reach like 12, 13, they already have a bunch of businesses, they're already making money, and the funny thing is, people say, you know, if you homeschool, your kid's going to be a loser. You know, he's going to end up selling shells on the beach or beads or something or whatever. And you know, and it's like, well, if they're having businesses at 12, like he already can sustain himself. He already is understanding, you know, the profit motive and price mechanism and you know, supply and demand and competition and improving his product, right? And these are valuable lessons. And if that's not a success, I don't really know what is.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of young children have the freedom and the time to try entrepreneurship, and a lot of homeschool parents are entrepreneurs themselves, so they're going to model what their children do. But yeah, the public school system is in the business of creating people that are like everyone else. So I think the cool thing about homeschooling and unschooling is it provides the opportunity for experimentation and for individuality, which really has the potential to create a better future, in my opinion.
Yeah, definitely. So, so is there any last remarks you want to say before we sign off?
No, I'd encourage people to check out bravenewbookstore.com. We recently launched the online store, so you can buy products from our storefront. We have all sorts of great books. We also sell a ton of great health products, and natural health is something that's very important to us and our family. A lot of people are against political tyranny, but they don't realize that they're tyrannizing their own bodies with poison and McDonald's and high fructose corn syrup and GMO and all sorts of terrible things. So if we truly want to embark on sovereignty and self-ownership, we need to take control of our own health. So people can check out bravenewbookstore.com. And if they want to listen to the podcast, you can visit SovereignBTC.com to learn about why Bitcoin is such a wonderful tool for personal sovereignty.
Very cool. So, actually, before we sign off, I just want to say you mentioned GMOs. Before I became a voluntarist, because I'm an acupuncturist and Chinese herbalist, so I'm heavy into holistic nutrition, holistic health, and so I was, you know, studying a lot about GMOs and vaccines and Monsanto and things like that, and a lot of those websites that I discovered, you know, were about banning GMOs, right? Empowering governments to ban GMOs, and I didn't see the disconnect between that and later I realized that, you know, well, it's more Monsanto is a special interest group, right? You know, you have DuPont, Syngenta, you know, all these special interest groups that are empowered and protected by legislation, by subsidies, by, you know, all these ways that the state erects barriers to entry for small businesses, and so banning these stuff would not do any good. It would make the problem worse. So now, you know, I talk more about boycotting. You know, if you don't like something, just talk about it on your YouTube, on your podcast, on your article. You know, write articles about it, right? So what's your view on that?
Government and politics always catches up to cultural norms, and I think we're seeing a shift away from poison food and GMOs and towards more natural, organic consumption. So, yeah, I think government inevitably is going to catch up, but boycotting and boycotting and supporting those companies like Whole Foods that are voluntarily choosing not to carry GMO products, I think that's definitely a good thing. And now I hear one of my children crying.
All right, so we're going to go. So thanks a lot, John, for the interview. This is Peaceful Anarchism on the Voluntary Virtues Network and theseedsofliberty.com and theconsciousresistance.com. Wishing everyone have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye.